You're listening to Give Yourself Some Leeway with me, your host, Eugene Lee. I spent the last 4 years trying to discover how to break the burnout cycle. And as a high achiever in a fast-paced world, it's very easy to slip back into old habits that leave you feeling overwhelmed and left behind. If you're anything like me, then you need to hear this. It's not your fault. Each episode is dedicated to help break the stigma around mental health in the workplace, end burnout culture for good, and the action steps that you can take today to do your part towards your personal growth and success. I am so happy that you're here today, and thank you again for joining us. I remember when I first started podcasting about burnout, and people had approached me with their own discomfort and deflections, trying to stop me from sharing my story because it made them uncomfortable, me bringing up these different emotions and raw feelings. And they just said, Eugene, it's great. We respect that you're sharing your feelings and all this in the podcast, but I don't feel like it relates to me. Whatever you're going through, it cannot be what I'm going through, because we know you. You're this person who does so many things all at once, and you're always busy. You're getting up at 3 a.m. to go to the gym before working a 12-hour shift, and that's absolutely psychotic. That's crazy. So whatever you're experiencing, it's because of that craziness. And whatever you're doing to recover from that is probably also crazy. And that got me thinking that, maybe I'm not the only person who's experiencing this overwhelm. Maybe there are other people out there who've experienced overwhelm and stress in the workplace. And maybe they have found other ways of recovering from that, or a different approach that I haven't thought of. And now we're over 100 episodes later, and I have a better understanding of different approaches, different ways that people can recover from burnout, different ways that people have burnt out at all different ages as well. People in their 20s, we've had students, we've had people in their 30s, we've had CEOs in their 40s and 50s experiencing burnout and overcoming that. But I've also learned that burnout is not the only state of workplace disengagement and dissatisfaction and stress that can affect us. For example, one of my guests, Paul Teasdale, he mentioned this state of, it wasn't a burnout, but more of a fizzle out. And I never came upon that concept before of a fizzle out until I read an article recently about a state called brownout and boreout. And this brownout, as strange as it sounded like this fizzle out state that Paul Teasdale talked about. Rather than being overwhelmed and overworked in this state and left in a state of exhaustion like burnout does, it comes from feeling numb, indifferent, and disconnected from the work, that you just don't feel challenged or interested in the work anymore. So as Paul described, it was a matter of just fizzling out and looking for a new role. But what I'm seeing more often, rather than burnout, I'm seeing people who are quiet quitting because of a phenomenon called boreout. And this occurs when you just are so bored, or you just so understimulated in your role because you're given underwhelming tasks, you have an insufficient workload, or maybe there's this mismatch between your current skills and your job responsibilities. And that can lead to a massive disengagement from your work. If you're not feeling like you're being challenged to your full potential, then that can really have a negative impact on how you see your day-to-day work. It's also interesting, the more that I looked into this topic of boreout, I was looking up trying to find other podcasts where they discussed boreout, and the term boreout did not come up in many other English-speaking podcasts. I found it in some French and I found it in some German podcasts, but the term boreout itself was not mentioned much in other English episodes. So why is there less information out there about boreout? Is it a bigger taboo subject than burnout. So I found the book Diagnose Boreout. It was by two Swiss business consultants, Peter Werder and Philip Rothlin, and they described this bore-out phenomenon as it was just this psychological disorder of understimulation at work. And not only is it compared to burnout when you're overwhelmed for all this overworking and all this stress, the understimulation caused by bore out because your job isn't challenging enough can cause physical symptoms and just as much stress and exhaustion from trying to look busy when you're understimulated at work, trying to put up that facade and masking the fact that you're not as stimulated in your work or challenging in your work as you want to be. But you also don't want to let your boss know that you're not busy enough or you're not being challenged in your role for fear of losing that job. Or as also for being afraid of being given extra duties. And that was something that I found strange. As a high achiever, I always looked for those extra duties, those extra responsibilities in order to fulfill that next level of success. To avoid that plateau, I always looked for the extra responsibilities. What can get me to the next level? Whereas when people experience bore out, they know that they're not being challenged enough. They know that they're not being stimulated enough in their role, but there's this phenomenon that leads them to try to avoid extra responsibilities for fear that they may have to do more work. And the toxic aspect of this is there's a concept called straining. And this is when an employer deliberately provokes a bore out by depriving an employee of work content. They deliberately release them from tasks, exclude them from meetings, or withdraw them from projects. And as a result, they become socially excluded in the workplace and they'll begin to get bored. They're understimulated, underchallenged, they have no potential for progress. And this will increase their likelihood of taking sick leave and result in a bore out. In many cases, the little workload that they have left, they'll probably make more mistakes or they'll ultimately quit because they're just not being challenged enough in their role anymore. And the reason why employers do this is because it will cost them more to dismiss them, or maybe they don't have the grounds to terminate them, or maybe they're just waiting for the employee to make enough mistakes so that they can terminate them on their grounds or have better grounds of dismissal. And I find that such toxic workplace practice that rather than having a conversation with an employee to find out why they're not maybe progressing in a certain role, maybe they don't have the skill set, they require training, maybe they're not excelling in this area, maybe there's not a role for them. Rather than having that open line of communication, that they would rather strain that employee to the point where they're understimulated, underchallenged, and it takes a toll on their physical, mental, and emotional health, and hope that they will take it upon themselves to dismiss themselves. However, not all employees know that they're experiencing bore out. They don't know that they need to take it upon themselves to take care of their mental health, to take care of their physical health if they're understimulated in their role. Some believe, oh, well, this is the nature of the work. This is the workload I'm going to be given, but I need to look busy. They may be only given 2 or 3 days worth of work a week. So they're going to stretch that out and make themselves look busy. They're going to take regular breaks or maybe do some personal work, maybe do some personal emails or do some online shopping or go for longer breaks to try and stretch that work out to last over the week and look busy. while not feeling stimulated in their work, not feeling proud of or taking ownership of the work that they've done because they feel demoralized or underappreciated. They're not going to take up the initiative to ask for more work. They're not going to look for new work from the boss that is straining them. And of course, they don't want to lose the job either. So they're going to make it look like they're busier than they really are. Put up that facade and try to stretch it out for as long as humanly possible. And I know some people feel like they're only being rewarded for their work by being given more work, but straining, if you're not getting any work or you're completing your task and not being given the praise or any other work to do, and you feel like, okay, I can't hand in this project yet because I know I won't be given anything else. And then I won't be able to pretend like I'm being busy all the time because they'll know I have nothing else to do. And they'll have this pseudo commitment strategy where they work through lunches or they stay later after work to try and make it look like they're busier than they are. But all the while, stressing themselves out more because they're trying to keep that facade and in their own minds knowing I have to make it look busy while also looking like I'm not incompetent in my role, and also that I am getting work done by close enough to the deadline that I'm looking busy enough while also not looking like I can't complete my work. So all of those mind games and negative narratives are going on as well, and that can really take a toll on your health. So how do you recognize if you're experiencing symptoms of bore out? So here are a few questions. If you answer yes to any of these questions, there is a risk that you could be suffering from bore out, or maybe you're on your way of running the risk of suffering from bore out. So number one, am I bored at work? Am I bored at work? Do I feel unhappy at work? Does my work give me a deeper sense of meaning? Do I often spend my working time on private things? Am I taking unnecessary time to complete my work? Do I pretend to be busy in front of my employer or my colleagues? Am I exhausted after a day of work, even though there wasn't much to do? Am I thinking about changing jobs, but refraining from applying for financial reasons or fear of further stress in a new role? If you feel that any of these apply to you, you can always reach out for help and support. Reach out to a manager, communicate to a manager to take on new responsibilities or a challenge, or not say, let's say you can't just approach a manager and say, look, I don't have enough work here, I want more work. Try and come up with an idea or a suggestion. Say that I'm currently working this project, but I've recognized this in the office. This could help to improve how we do things in the team. Could this be something that we look into collaboration together, or maybe I could collaborate with another colleague and put this together in line with my other duties, and showing that initiative to the manager that you want to take on more responsibilities, but you have brought the initiative to the manager rather than expecting the manager to find a responsibility or task for you to complete. And maybe you're so far into Boreout that you're not stimulated to make these changes. Maybe it's time to communicate with the manager or with HR that you're trying to progress in this role, but you don't feel fully applied or fully stimulated, and you want extra responsibility. And how would you go about that? And if those talks are not productive, then it may be time to look for a new role, look for a new company, look for a role that stimulates you a bit more. Maybe that's a bit more challenging. Maybe that challenge is what you need. So, are you feeling bored at work? Do Do you feel understimulated or under-challenged, under-recognized because you're not being challenged enough in your role? You're not being given enough duties. You feel that there's no sense of progression. Maybe you're a leader or a manager and you're unintentionally straining your employees because maybe you feel like, oh, I've given them too much pressure. I'm going to take some of those duties off them and maybe they'll work a bit better. And then they find themselves understimulated. It's having a negative effect. You're unintentionally creating that toxic burnout culture, Boreout culture even, in your workplace. Maybe it's time to open up those lines of communication. Be more transparent with your team. If anything in this episode has planted a seed or triggered you in any way, and you want to have a conversation about that, you can always reach out to me at giveyourselfsomeleeway.com. You can book in a call with me. On Instagram, you can send me a DM or a voice note at eugene.leeway. Or you can shoot me an email at eugene@leeway.ie. Thank you, and I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, take care.